I will first ask the hearing team to please elevate the court reporter. Good morning to the court reporter. Are you ready for us to go? Oh, it looks like we have one more, the other half to be elevated. We'll wait one moment.
Thank you so much. Yes, I am.
Thank you. Then I will start with introductions. Good morning. It's October 14th, 2025. I'm Nicole Kinsey, presiding hearing officer for the Administrative Hearings Office of the State Water Resources Control Board. This is the hearing on the pending petitions for change of water right permits 16478, 16479, 16481, and 16482 of the Department of Water Resources for the proposed Delta Conveyance project. I am conducting this hearing in accordance with the July 31st, 2024 Notice of Public Hearing and subsequent amendments. This hearing is being conducted by Zoom webinar and is being broadcast live on the AHO YouTube channel. Both the audio and video of this hearing are being recorded, and we will post files of this recording in the FTP folder for this proceeding. The YouTube recording will also be available on the AHO YouTube webpage. Ms. Mullen of the AHO will be handling the screen sharing of exhibits and moving along of the slides. So if you are a witness today, you are welcome to address Ms. Mullen and ask her to move along and advance your slides. And cross-examiners are welcome to ask Ms. Mullen to bring up a particular exhibit. If you're experiencing technical difficulties trying to communicate with us or accessing Zoom this morning, please send an email to the inbox at dcp-wr-petition@waterboards.ca.gov. And we will, the AHO team is monitoring that and we will try to assist. Our schedule today is a little bit different than our standard because we will be breaking, I'd like to say a hard stop at noon so we all can get there. So I will call it that. We'll do a hard stop at noon and then we will be reconvening for the upstream Delta portion of our site visit at 1 o'clock. We will take a mid-morning break as we usually do, and we will try to get through EID and PCWA's witnesses this morning. I think that's the goal for all of us. First, though, and hopefully we won't take too much time, I did want to revisit the issue of the rebuttal schedule. I think where we had talked last, I had floated the idea of staggering rebuttal. I did want to give DWR a chance to consider it and respond maybe more thoughtfully than in the first 1 minute after I put the idea out there. But what to reiterate the proposal, it would be to, and I think it really makes sense and actually will be more efficient for everyone, is to set a deadline for DWR's rebuttal exhibits, conduct the portion of the hearing for DWR's rebuttal witnesses, then have an exhibit deadline for the protestants, and then conduct hearing days for the protestants' witnesses. And then I would reserve for DWR the option at that point to request SIR rebuttal if DWR sought to present or submit SIR rebuttal evidence. There would be no need for protestants to have SIR rebuttal because there would be nothing to SIR rebut, given the staggered rebuttal deadlines. I wanted to give DWR a chance to respond to that, and if protestants want to chime in, depending on how the conversation goes, you're of course welcome to do that. So I will look to, I see Ms. Carroll is nearer to the top of my list, so let's please elevate Ms. Carroll. Good morning, Ms. Carroll.
Good morning. I'm doing my audio logistics. One moment, please.
Understood. It's only 9:05.
That too. Good morning, Ann Carroll for DWR. Thank you.
Good morning.
We are still evaluating the letter that we recently received from your office, Hearing Officer Kinsey. and also the rebuttal proposal. If I were to give any input at this point, one question would be whether we could have the rebuttal exhibit deadline be concurrent.
Well, that would, I think that that would mean then protestants would get surrebuttal because they would not have seen your rebuttal.
Okay,
So I think it eliminates some of the efficiencies here. That's why I was thinking about it in that way.
got it. Okay, I'd like
So
to.
maybe consider that one a little further.
Okay.
When can you get back to me tomorrow?
Yes. How about what if the deadline for their rebuttal is after hours, but it's while we're still finishing our rebuttal witnesses?
That's a possibility, and I will look to protestants to jump in. Once again, that opens the possibility that if there is a surprise testimony that comes out on cross, that we would then have a narrow rebuttal for the protestants as well. So that's there are trade-offs in all directions.
Totally understand. I think by asking those questions, I've figured out where you're going and you're thinking. So
Right.
Your schedule sounds good.
Oh, all right then. Thank you. Ms. Tabor, did you want to jump in? I saw your hand was up and now down because possibly we worked through that. You're welcome to, let's please elevate Ms. Tabor. Good morning.
Good morning, Hearing Officer Kenzie Kelly Tabor on behalf of the Sacramento County et al. Parties. And it does appear that you may have worked through the issue, but on behalf of our parties and also other Delta counties whose council is not able to be on this morning, we do support the staggered rebuttal schedule, including no overlap in our deadline of submittal with the cross-examination of DWR's witnesses, because it just seems like it will lead to a more inefficient schedule, more cost, more time for everyone. So we support your proposal.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Tabor. Is there anyone else, or are there any other procedural issues before we move to the substance of this morning? If we can please elevate Mr. Saint-Lubert B. Good morning, and you're welcome to come off mute and on camera.
Good morning, Hearing Officer Kenzie. I am Justin St. Lubert BA for DTech, and I just wanted to give a quick update on the site visit. In light of the weather, we are still planning to proceed, rain or shine as scheduled. So just wanted to let everyone know to dress accordingly, umbrellas and rain jackets, presumably. And just a reminder to everyone that we're planning to meet at West Pusune on Marina Way, West Sacramento, across the river from Discovery Park.
Thank you. Thank you for that update and reminder for everyone. And I have my rain jacket. I'm going to pull the Wonder Woman over our little lunch break here. A different outfit. Is there anything else we should address? Then with that, I believe I should be looking to Mr. Donlin, I think. Yes, if we can please elevate Mr. Donlin. Mr. Donlin, good morning. You're welcome to come on camera and off mute.
Good morning, Ms. Kenzie. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Terrific. The last time it wasn't so successful. Thank you. I think this morning I will give a short opening statement, and then we have a panel, but I'd like to put my witnesses on sequentially, have them put their testimony, summarize their written testimony, and then make them available for cross-examination as a group.
Great. Okay. Thank you. And you are welcome to proceed with your opening statement.
Terrific. Thank you. Good morning, again, Ms. Kinsey and AHO staff. My name is Robert Donlin, and I'm a counsel to the El Dorado Irrigation District and Placer County Water Agency, which I will refer to today, and the witnesses will, as EID and PCWA. We appreciate the opportunity to present an opening statement this morning. We want to begin by emphasizing that our agencies are not asking the board to deny DWR's change petitions. Rather, we are asking only that if the board approves the petition, it do so subject to conditions that ensure the project and its North Delta diversions are implemented consistent with the area of origin statutes so that the DCP does not redirect impacts to water right holders and other in-basin users in the Sacramento Valley upstream of the Delta, including EID and PCWA. Under Water Code Section 1702, the department must demonstrate that its proposed changes will not operate to the injury of any legal user of water. The department has not and cannot meet this burden unless the State Water Board conditions the DWR permits. The department's petitions and supporting technical information do not closely analyze how proposed project operations will affect the frequency and duration of Delta excess conditions, nor how DWR's upstream reservoir operations may affect the timing and availability of water for other upstream water users in the Sacramento River watershed. When it approved the development of the State Water Project in the 1950s, the legislature expressly prioritized the water supplies of the Sacramento River system for uses in the area of origin. Collectively, the area and watershed of origin statutes ensure that the State Water Project will not deprive the regions where water originates of the supplies reasonably needed to meet the demands of those areas. These protections also are expressly included in the department's existing permits at issue in this proceeding. As DWR proposes to increase exports from the Delta, it is imperative that any State Water Board approval of the DCP petitions include terms and conditions that reinforce that the area of origin statutes mean what they say. EID and PCWA depend on the area of origin statutes and the corresponding State Water Project permit conditions to protect their priority to American River water supplies for future planned growth and to assist water users in the area of origin to meet their water demands. Without appropriate conditions to ensure that the DCP does not redirect impacts to water right holders upstream in the Sacramento Valley, there is a substantial risk that DCP will cause legal injury to EID and PCWA in contravention of those statutes. EID's and PCWA's testimony describes existing operations and water transfers and the refill conditions that DWR routinely imposes on these operations. In general, the refill criteria prevent EID and PCWA from refilling its reservoirs when the Delta is in balanced conditions following a water right change or transfer. These refill requirements impair EID's and PCWA's water rights to divert and beneficially use water in violation of the area of origin statutes and the terms and conditions in DWR's permits, and that results in legal injury. Our testimony will demonstrate that unless the State Water Project permits are properly conditioned by the State Water Board, operational constraints that result from bypass conditions at the proposed North Delta diversion facilities will be redirected to EID, PCWA, and other senior water right holders in the Sacramento River watershed. We appreciate the hearing officer's consideration of this testimony. And with that, Ms. Kinsey, I will ask that you swear in the EID and PCWA witnesses, and I will get them started on their testimony summaries.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Donlin. It sounds like I have an echo here. Oh, it has clarified. I'll look to the hearing team. Can we please elevate Lee Bergfeld, Andrew Fecco, and Daniel Corcoran? Also, please elevate Ms. Morris. I should have, and I apologize, Ms. Morris. Good morning.
Good morning.
And will we be starting, Mr. Donlin, with Mr. Bergfeld?
No, Ms. Kinsey. I think we're going to start with Mr. Corcoran, and then we'll go to Mr. Fecco, and then clean up with Mr. Bergfeld.
Wonderful. So I'll administer the oath. We can just go through before each testifies, and I'll start with Mr. Corcoran. If you would, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you will give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And with that, you may proceed with Mr. Corcoran.
Thank you, Ms. Kinsey. Mr. Corcoran, will you please state and spell your name for the record?
Yes, Daniel Corcoran, Corcoran.
Thank you. Is EID PCWA number exhibit number 111 an accurate statement of your written testimony for this proceeding?
Yes.
Do you have any corrections to make to that exhibit?
No.
Are EID PCWA exhibits 112 through 116 true and correct copies of the exhibits referenced in your testimony?
Yes.
Okay. With that, Mr. Corcoran, would you mind summarizing your testimony?
Yes, thank you. Hearing Officer Quincy, my name is Daniel Corcoran. I've been employed by the El Dorado Irrigation District for about 21 years. Over the past 10 of those years, I've had lead responsibility in planning for and executing water transfers on behalf of the El Dorado Irrigation District. Those transfers have been sent to willing buyers south of the Delta, which therefore necessarily involves through Delta transfers. As a condition of those transfers, Department of Water Resources has imposed refill criteria on the last 3 of those transfers since 2018. And refill criteria basically eliminates the ability for the districts to refill its reservoirs, the available capacity conducted by those transfers until the Delta is in excess conditions. That determination of excess is actually determined by the Department of Water Resources as reflected in our refill agreements. And it basically gives them control over when the district is able to refill its reservoirs following a transfer. Becomes exceedingly difficult for the districts to meet its customers' demands and maintain adequate water supply when we're unable to refill our reservoirs because of these refill restrictions, excuse me. And that's a summary of my testimony.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Corcoran. And then I believe, am I right, Mr. Donlin, Mr. Fecco will be next?
That's correct, Ms. Kinsey.
Thank you. Mr. Fecco, if you would please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you will give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. With that, back to you, Mr. Donlin.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Fecco. Will you please state and spell your name for the record?
Sure. Andrew Fecco, F as in Frank, ECKO.
Thank you. Is EID PCWA Exhibit 104 an accurate statement of your written testimony for this proceeding?
It is.
Are EID PCWA Exhibits 105 through 110 exhibits to that testimony, and are they accurate and true?
Yes.
With that, Mr. Fecco, would you please summarize your written testimony?
Sure. I'll note before I start that my legal counsel, Dan Kelly's in the room with me at PCWA. So my name is Andrew Fecco. I serve as the general manager of the Placer County Water Agency. I have 27 years of experience in the California water and energy management field. PCWA is responsible for water resource planning and management, supplying irrigation and drinking water, and producing hydroelectric energy. The agency operates 9 water treatment plants, 170 miles of irrigation canal, 2 major storage reservoirs, and 5 hydroelectric generating facilities. The agency serves the communities of Auburn, Loomis, Newcastle, Penryn, Rockland, and Lincoln, and wholesales water to the city of Roseville and the San Juan Water District. The Middle Fork American River project, constructed in the 1960s, includes reservoirs that provide water for electrical energy generation and consumptive water supply. PCWA has been a signatory to the American River Water Forum Agreement since 2000, committing to actions such as surface water management, improved fishery flow releases, and water conservation actions. One action in our Water Forum Purveyor-specific agreement is the release of water from our reservoirs in dry years to augment fishery flows in the Lower American River, provided that the agency can transfer that water to another entity after the fishery flow commitments have been met in the Lower American. The agency has lived up to this commitment faithfully since the year 2000, and we have always found a buyer for water released from our reservoirs. In 2013, PCWA entered into a memorandum of understanding with East Bay Municipal Utility District for a long-term water transfer project. Pursuant to the MOU, PCWA conveys to East Bay Mud an exclusive option to negotiate and enter into a long-term water transfer agreement under which PCWA would sell our dry year water forum commitment water to East Bay Mud for diversion at East Bay Mud's Freeport project intake. In 2022, PCWA and East Bay Mud proposed to transfer a little over 21,000 acre-feet to the East Bay Mud service area, consistent with our water forum agreement. The Department of Water Resources and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation submitted comments to the State Board regarding PCWA's proposed temporary transfer petition and requested that the State Board impose refill requirements to restrict PCWA's subsequent diversions at French Meadows and Hellhole reservoirs, alleging, without substantiation in my view, that PCWA's refill of its reservoirs would cause injury to the state water project and in subsequent water years when PCWA refills its reservoirs. PCWA was eventually forced to enter into refill agreements with DWR and Reclamation in order to fulfill its water forum commitments. In my experience as PCWA's general manager, I have not observed Reclamation or DWR entering into refill agreements with other parties when changing operations at their project reservoirs, which may impact the very factors, such as delta conditions, that they impose on PCWA as a condition of state board mandated refill agreements, which have become increasingly onerous over time. I'll just emphasize in summary that PCWA desires to ensure that when DWR constructs the Delta Conveyance project, that they do not jump ahead of PCWA's area of origin needs and uses for water. That's a summary of my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fecco.
Thank you, Mr. Fecco.
I will turn next to Mr. Bergfeld. If you would please come off mute and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you will give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. To you,
Good
Mr.
morning,
Conley.
Mr. Bergfeld. Will you please state and spell your name for the record?
Lee Bergfeld, Bergfeld.
Thank you. Is EID PCWA-100 a true and correct copy of your written testimony in this proceeding?
Yes.
Are EID PCWA 101 and 102 exhibits to that testimony?
Yes.
And are they true and correct to your knowledge?
Yes, they are.
Is EID PCWA-103 a PowerPoint presentation that you intend to use this morning to summarize your testimony?
Yes, it is.
Do you have any objection to me asking Ms. Mullen to pull that up so that you can begin your testimony?
No.
Ms. Mullen, will you please pull up EID PCWA-103? Mr. Bergfeld, please begin to summarize your testimony when you're ready.
Certainly. All right, Ms. Mullen, if we could go to the next slide, please. Okay, as a little bit of an overview of what I'm going to cover this morning in my testimony, I'm going to start by talking about reservoir refill agreements and historical delta excess conditions. I want to explain what has happened to the delta conditions through time and how that has affected reservoir refill agreements for parties that make water available through transfer through reservoir release in the San Joaquin River Basin. The purpose of that introduction is to provide some background and context to what I see occurring in the Sacramento River Basin with the Delta Conveyance project. The next, I'm going to talk briefly about the DCP bypass criteria and then cover two analyses that we did that look at this condition that I've termed delta excess with DCP restrictions and the frequency that that might occur into the future. And then finally, I'll wrap up with a couple of conclusions. Next slide, please. Okay, I want to start by talking about reservoir refill agreements that, as Mr. Fecco and Mr. Corcoran talked about, those two districts have entered into as a condition of transfers in the past. And one of the prime criteria in past reservoir refill agreements is that the refill of those reservoirs, or that space vacated through the transfer, can only occur during delta excess conditions. And when I use the term delta excess throughout my testimony this morning, I'm defining that as it's defined in the Coordinated Operations Agreement that DWR and Reclamation operate to. In very simple terms, what that means is that there's more water going to delta outflow than is required by the regulations such as D1641 to go to delta outflow. That's what I mean by delta excess conditions. And there are two different categories for delta excess conditions. The first is sometimes called true delta excess. And under true delta excess, it's in excess under COA, and the Central Valley Project and the State Water Project are able to divert without limitations the water that they would like to divert. And as illustrated in the figure here in the lower right side of the slide, historically, for the period of about the last 15 years, from water year 2010 through 2024, true excess conditions have occurred about 15% of all days within that 15-year period. The second type of delta excess condition is a delta excess with restrictions. And what that means is that the delta is still in excess. There's more water going to delta outflow than is required, but the projects, CVP and the SWP, are not able to divert all the water that they would like to be able to divert. They're restricted by some non-discretionary requirements. As illustrated in that figure on the right, that's happened about 25% of the time, of all time within the last 15 years. That delta excess with restrictions has also occurred much more frequently since 2008, when the 2008 and the 2009 BIOP increased the frequency of delta excess with restrictions by imposing some of those requirements on the project's ability to export water at Banks and Jones Pumping Plant. Next slide, please. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about those delta excess with restrictions. And again, this is context to what we see happening with DCP later in the testimony. So the pie chart here in the upper right corner of this slide is the frequency of within that 25% of time that the delta has been in an excess with restrictions condition over the last 15 years, what the restriction was. And you can see in the pie chart that the primary restriction on the ability of the projects to export water has been restrictions on Old and Middle River flows in the Delta. That has happened approximately 64% of the time. The second most frequent is the San Joaquin River inflow to export ratio and the San Joaquin River 1-to-1 inflow to export ratio. The first one of those, the IE, was contained in a biological opinion. The second one is contained in D1641. For all of these, the OMR and the San Joaquin River IE and 1-to-1, the ability to export water is really a function of how much water is coming into the Delta from the San Joaquin River. And that's measured in the San Joaquin River at Vernalis. This has kind of evolved over time because before 2008, these things didn't occur very frequently. they increased, and the frequency of delta excess with restrictions increased significantly after that. Became a function, the ability of the projects to export water became a function of the inflow from the San Joaquin River. And what we've seen is that refill agreements between DWR and USBR and the entities that transfer water from the San Joaquin Basin through reservoir release have now started to require a payback of that refill that may have occurred during a delta excess with San Joaquin River restrictions, because the refill occurs, the San Joaquin River flow is less, the projects are not able to export as much water due to that refill, and they have to pay some of that back. So that's just the context as we now start to talk about DCP. If we could move to our next slide, please. Okay, just briefly, the DCP bypass criteria as contained in the ITP require a bypass of the Sacramento River flow that's entering the delta or is at the North Delta intakes. Those bypass flows vary by month, and they also vary by how much water is coming into the delta from the Sacramento River side. That required bypass essentially determines the allowable DCP diversion. So as an example, if there were 20,000 CFS coming into the delta from the Sacramento River, the bypass requirement may be 90% of that 20,000 CFS flow, or 18,000 CFS, and the allowable diversion at the North Delta intakes of DCP would be 2,000 CFS. So the allowable diversion is a function of Sacramento River flow entering the delta. And that sets up the situation where I think that bypass flow restricting DCP diversions to less than 6,000 CFS of capacity will create a delta excess with DCP restrictions condition. This is very analogous to what has transpired on the San Joaquin Basin, where we have a delta excess with San Joaquin River restrictions that has been incorporated into their refill agreements. I see the same thing playing out on the Sacramento River system and refill agreements between EID and DWR and Reclamation or PCWA and the projects in the future with DCP. If you could please move to the next slide. So the next couple of slides now go through some analyses that we performed to understand the frequency of this happening, because if it doesn't happen very often, it may not be a big deal. So this first slide is an analysis of calcium 3 modeling prepared by DWR. This is some of the ITP modeling that was submitted earlier this year. And this is just the existing conditions of the system without DCP, just what's happening based on DWR's modeling. And you see there's a frequency each month of the year for the 100-year simulation in calcium 3 of delta balanced or delta excess. Under delta balanced, you can't refill. Under delta excess, you can. And there's no need to differentiate between excess and excess with restrictions here, because as we saw previously, the vast majority of excess with restrictions conditions are a function of the San Joaquin River flow coming into the delta, not the Sacramento River flow. So they're not applicable to the refill agreements between PCWA and EID. So just as an example, the month of April, we have a delta excess condition about 70% of the time and a delta balance condition the remaining 30% of the time. We can move to the next slide, please. So in this analysis now, we did some post-processing of the DCP modeling provided by DWR, and this is a with DCP condition. And here we've now differentiated the excess condition into two different categories. One is excess without DCP restrictions. Those are the blue bars across the bottom of the figure. The second is an excess with DCP restrictions. And so there are three criteria that we looked at as we post-process the model results to understand and to define these orange bars on the figure. The first is that the delta had to be in an excess condition. So again, that's as defined by COA. The second is that the DCP is diverting water, but it's not diverting 6,000 CFS, the capacity, because if it were able to divert at capacity, then they'd be diverting all the water that they want, and it would be more of a true excess condition. And the third is, looking at the model output, is the DCP diversion was essentially constrained by the bypass criteria in the ITP. And so you can see, going back to our example for the month of April, 41% of the time the delta would be in an excess without DCP restrictions, and 29% of the time it would be in an excess with DCP restrictions. So these are the periods of time where I think in the future a refill agreement would say that PCWA and EID would be restricted from their ability to refill. We could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so next I want to talk about a completely separate analysis, but intended to get to the same thing, which is what's the frequency of a delta excess with DCP restrictions. So in this analysis, we looked at historical data for the Sacramento River at Freeport. We looked at the historical delta conditions and then those bypass criteria in the ITP to understand what would be the allowable DCP diversion. Focused on the months of December through June in 4 recent water years, and we looked at DCP operations only during historical delta excess or potential DCP operations. And I will say that these 4 water years that we're using in the analysis performed is very similar to the analysis performed by Mr. Bryant Georgie in DWR Exhibit 00309. So it's the same 4 years, and conceptually, I think it's the same sort of analysis. We can move to the next slide, please. Okay, we want to start with water year 2018. I want to describe these figures. The next 3 slides will look very similar, but just with different water years. So there's 2 squiggly lines going across the figure. The blue line is the historical Sacramento River at Freeport inflow into the delta. That blue line is plotted relative to the y-axis on the left side of the figure. You can see in water year 2018, between December and June, it reached almost 80,000 CFS somewhere in mid-April. The orange dash line here is an estimate of what the allowable DCP diversion would have been under the bypass criteria in the ITP. That's plotted relative to the y-axis on the right side of the figure. And you can see in those periods where the Sacramento River flow at Freeport spikes up in late March and mid-April, the DCP diversion capacity goes to 6,000 CFS. It kind of plateaus there at that level. There's blue bars that go across the top of the figure, and those blue bars illustrate periods of time when historically the delta was in an excess condition. So it would have been okay to refill upstream reservoirs during those periods of time underneath of the blue bar. So in 2018, the delta went into an excess condition in early January. It remained there until mid-February. There was a brief period of balance conditions, and then it again returned to excess conditions in early March and remained there until late May timeframe. That's all of those areas under the blue bar. And then finally, there's these red shaded regions, which are the excess with DCP restrictions period. These are the same sort of criteria that we used in the calcium 3 analysis, that historically the delta had to be in an excess condition. DCP would be able to divert, as shown by those orange lines being above the x-axis there, but they're not able to divert at 6,000 CFS. So they're restricted from diverting at capacity, creating this delta excess with DCP restrictions. In water year 2018, this happened a little bit more than half of the total time that the delta was in excess condition historically. So to make that very clear, about half of the time in 2018 that historically EID and PCWA would have been able to refill, they would have been restricted from being able to refill due to the excess with DCP restrictions in the delta. We move to the next slide, please. So this is an analysis of water year 2019. And the plot is the same, all the same sort of information. You can see it's a wetter year. In 2019, the inflow into the delta is higher. There's frequently periods when DCP would be able to divert at 6,000 CFS under the bypass criteria in the ITP, but still about 40% of the time, and this is the time that the delta was in an excess condition historically, about 40% of the time, it would have then shifted to an excess with DCP restrictions. DCP is able to divert, but not at 6,000 CFS capacity. And essentially, their allowable diversion is a function of the Sacramento River inflow into the delta. You can move to the next slide, please. So water year 2022 was a critical year, and there was still a period when the delta was historically in excess, beginning around mid-December, lasting through the month of January. DCP would have been able to divert during this period under the bypass criteria in the ITP, but all of the time would have been an excess with DCP restrictions because the flow in the Sacramento River never got high enough to allow them to divert 6,000 CFS. Then next slide, please. Final year of analysis is water year 2024. We see a lot of the same information. It's approximately 70% of the time when historically the delta was in excess, it would now be in an excess with DCP restrictions condition. And I think we can move to the last slide, please. Okay, so in conclusion, it's my opinion that the operation of the DCP will, at times, create a delta excess with DCP restrictions condition. And then I'd like to clarify my second conclusion here a little bit, just some of the language. And the language that I'll read is wording from the tech memo, Exhibit EID PCWA 102. It says that future reservoir refill agreements between PCWA or EID and DWR will limit the ability to refill reservoirs during delta excess with DCP restrictions or require payback of the refill or a portion of the refill if it occurs during delta excess with DCP restrictions. So it's a little different than the wording here because I just want to be as clear as possible. I don't think that a future reservoir refill agreement will say thou shall not refill during delta excess with DCP restrictions. It will say if you refill, we're going to do accounting and you're going to have to pay back a portion of that refill. And the end result is the same to the upstream districts. They will have their reservoirs not full or not as full as they could have been had they been able to refill without the DCP with restriction condition. So I think the outcome is the same, but I just wanted to clarify the wording this morning. That concludes my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Bergfeld. Then with that, I believe I will turn to Ms. Morris. Do you have questions? If I'm right, do you have questions for this panel?
I do. Good morning, gentlemen. It's nice to see you all again. I don't need to introduce myself because we know each other, but how are you all this morning?
Well, thank you.
It's raining, so we should all be happy. It's good for water supply. I'm going to jump around a little bit, but Mr. Fecco, in your testimony, you reference EID PCWA 106, correct?
Yes.
And that's an MOU with East Bay Mud for a water transfer, correct?
Do we want to pull it up on screen?
If we need to, but I think you said it. I
Yes.
just want to clarify.
Sure.
Okay.
Let me bring it up on my end.
And the transfer of that water is then not used in PCWA's service area, correct?
It's used in East Bay Mud Service Area, and it's utilized in the Lower American River for fishery benefits.
So that's not PCWA's service area once it goes to East Bay Mud, correct?
Correct.
And that MOU, in essence, I think you said this is an agreement where PCWA would sell dry year water to East Bay Mud for diversion at the Freeport project intake consistent with PCWA's water form agreement commitments, correct?
Correct.
And is EDPCWA 107 the order issued by the State Water Resources Control Board approving the East Bay Mud transfer?
Yes.
And is Exhibit EDPCWA 108 an agreement to work with USBR and DWR on reservoir refill criteria in order to effectuate the East Bay Mud transfer?
Yes, it's the refill agreement for that transfer.
And is Exhibit EDPCWA 109 a refill criteria agreement regarding the sale of water to Westlands Water District?
Yes.
And is EID PCWA 110, an agreement regarding the sale of water to Westlands Water District?
Yes.
And is that agreement because in order to move the water, you have to rely on DWR infrastructure to convey the water to Westlands Water District?
In that year, it's for the conveyance of the water transfer for that year. That's correct.
And Mr. Fecco, was PCWA compensated for the transfers that we just discussed?
Yes.
And in order for PCWA to be compensated and make the water available, you sign the reservoir refill criteria agreements, correct?
We were ordered to enter into reservoir refill agreements by the State Water Board with Department of Water Resources and the Bureau of Reclamation before we could transfer water.
And was that because in order to ensure there was no injury?
There was injury alleged by State Water Project and the Central Valley Project, and the State Board order then ordered us to enter into a refill agreement with those two parties.
And the only reason you had to enter it was to be able to move the water and sell it, correct?
In order for us to be able to move water, the State Board ordered us to enter into refill agreements with those two entities. That's correct.
And Mr. Cochran, you submitted EID PCWA 113 and 114 in support of your testimony, correct?
That's correct.
And is EID PCWA 113 an agreement regarding the sale of water to Westlands Water District?
I'm pulling it up right now to double check. Yes.
And was that agreement relying on DWR infrastructure to convey water to Westlands Water District?
That's correct.
And is EID PCWA 114 another agreement regarding a sale to Westlands Water District?
Yes.
And Mr. Cochran, was EID compensated for those water transfers?
Ultimately, yes.
And in order to be compensated and make the water available to Westlands Water District, EID signed those agreements, correct?
Yes.
Do you have an understanding of area of origin, Mr. Cochran?
That's not in my area of purview.
So would you consider, do you have to enter into reservoir refill agreements in order to use water in EID service area?
For our own customers' use?
Yes.
No, we do not need to enter a refill agreement with ourselves to sell water to our customers.
Mr. Brickfield, if we could, I have a couple questions for you. And I think I'm going to refer to your report, but I really just want to understand the rationale. So I don't know if we need to pull it up, but you're welcome to tell me that it would be easier. On your report in 102, figures 3 through 8, did you create those using a spreadsheet?
Yes,
And did you produce that spreadsheet?
I did not.
Can you make it available?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Mr. Bergfeld, currently the phrase you coined, delta excess with DCP restrictions, doesn't exist within any refill agreements, correct?
That's correct.
And for purposes of that second analysis that you explained that creates the delta with excess conditions, are you assuming current regulatory conditions? For example, D1641, the existing biological opinions?
I am considering whatever the regulatory condition was at the time that the delta condition was determined historically.
So for example, in 1 year, there may be a different biological opinion. So you are using whatever the year is, whatever the existing biological opinion and other regulatory restrictions are, that is what you are considering. Is that accurate?
I would say that I am not considering anything. I am relying upon the past determination of delta excess conditions made by the Bureau of Reclamation and the Department of Water Resources.
And in your opinion, that would include whatever current regulatory conditions were in place at that time.
That would be my understanding, yes.
And is it possible that the regulatory conditions could change in the future?
Yes, it is.
And in order for refill criteria to apply to that change, PCWA and EID would have to enter into discussions and negotiations with USBR and DWR to make any changes to their existing refill reservoir refill agreements, correct?
Objection, ambiguous. If Ms. Morris could restate that question. I'm not sure I understood what the question was.
Please, Ms. Morris, let's try again.
Do you understand, Mr. Bergfeld?
I can restate what I think you asked, but
I'll ask it again. If reservoir refill criteria were to change in the existing PCWA and EID refill agreements, it would require a discussion and negotiation with DWR and USBR, correct? In other words, stated another way, DWR just can't unilaterally change reservoir refill criteria that exist in current agreements, correct?
well, I think any current agreement has already been signed and couldn't be unilaterally changed. I think in any future agreement is subject to negotiation at that time.
And in the future, you agree that if PCWA or EID want to do water transfers.
I'm sorry, Ms. Morris, you probably hear it too. There's a strange feedback and I don't know where it's coming from. Now it's quiet.
Okay.
Might have been Mr. Donlin. That's
Okay.
all right. Please go ahead.
I lost my spot. Okay. So I think you just said, but yeah, I'm getting the weird.
I think it's Mr. Donlin. Do you mind being on mute? Let's see if that works.
Okay, now let me try again. Okay.
Thank you.
If I promise, Mr. Donlin, if I hear the noise, I'll stop and let you object. In the future, transfers that EID or PCWA may enter into, if reservoir refill criteria were going to apply, those would have to be under new and separate agreements, correct?
Correct.
Objection. I think you're asking Mr. Bergfeld to make an assumption based on facts that aren't before him. Mr. Bergfeld isn't the one that will be negotiating a refill agreement.
I think he answered the question. So
yeah, I think. And also, Mr. Donlin, I think it was Mr. Corcoran where the audio was coming from. So you're welcome to stay on or off mute as you choose. Thank you.
And sitting here today, Mr. Bergfeld, we don't know the hydrologic conditions that may be applicable in the future, correct?
That's correct.
And similarly, we don't know what quantity or amount of water transfers PCWA or EID may want to make available, correct?
Also correct.
And we also, sitting here today, don't know what regulatory requirements may be in place.
Also correct.
And I wanted to ask you a couple questions. If we can please pull up Ms. Mullen, EID PCWA 102. And I think it's PDF page 4. It's the big pie chart. Yeah. And if Mr. Bergfeld, which of these restrictions are currently, is PCWA currently subject to in their reservoir refill criteria?
It's my understanding that they are subject to the delta being in an excess condition in their refill criteria, in their refill agreements.
Right, but in this pie chart, this is not the delta being in excess. These are specific time events, correct? And is PCWA currently subject to any of these restrictions shown in this pie chart in its existing reservoir refill agreement?
Because the delta is always in an excess condition, right? And for any of these to be, this is an excess with restrictions, then it's my understanding that they are not subject to them.
So currently, they're not subject to any of the specific restrictions you show here in this pie chart.
Not aware that they are.
Okay. And how about EID? Same question.
Same answer. I'm not aware that they are.
And for the refill, so if we could scroll down, Ms. Mullen, I believe it's the second paragraph on this page. Perfect. Do you see, Mr. Burford? Well, it says refill agreements between USBR, DWR, and entities that make water available for transfer. Do you see that sentence? So it's in the second paragraph, the second full sentence.
Yes, I do.
What refill agreements are you referring to?
Ones that I am aware of are between Reclamation, DWR, and Merced Irrigation District.
And any others, just Merced or?
Those are the only that I have firsthand knowledge of.
Okay. And for the refill agreements that you are considering with Merced in that statement, are those for reservoirs and I'm sorry, let me strike that. For the refill agreements that you considered in that statement on page 4, lines 12 to 15, for reservoirs in the San Joaquin River Basin, do any of them release to downstream storage reservoirs prior to that water release reaching Vernalis?
I think you asked whether Merced Irrigation District, the entity that I'm familiar with, releases from its reservoir to downstream storage reservoirs prior to the water reaching Vernalis. Did I get that correct?
You did very well.
Just to make sure that I'm being accurate in my answer, I think that Merced at Lake McClure releases to McSwain immediately downstream of Lake Merced, the primary storage facility. Water is then released to Merced Falls downstream of Lake McSwain, and then water is then released to Crocker-Huffman diversion dam, where it is diverted into the main canal. Then the water proceeds downstream to Vernalis. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but
it does. And if we could pull up Miss Mullen, DWR 1101. I think we're on R2. Either way, it didn't change between 1101 and 110R, so any version of those will work for the permit term I'm looking for. And then if we could just scroll so we could see this permit term 1, most of it, I think, on this, maybe one more line down, I think. Yeah, we can scroll down, but Mr. Burkfield, are you familiar with this permit term?
I've read it, but I would need to read it again to be familiar.
Do you want to take a minute? I have just 2 questions.
Sure.
Would you agree that this permit term states that DWR will not divert additional stored water releases beyond what would have been available absent the Delta Conveyance project?
From Oroville Reservoir and DWR's upstream facilities, I would agree that that's what the term says.
And do you agree that it states how that will be achieved in this permit term condition?
It will be achieved by limiting state water project diversions at South Delta facilities and the DCP to the amounts allowed under the Corps' Clifton Court permits when balance conditions exist.
And would you agree that this will be achieved, that this can be achieved in the manner as described in this permit term 1?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Fecco, are you familiar with the State Water Board's Water Rights Decision D-1641?
I am aware that there is a decision 1641, yes.
And are you familiar that it has certain tables that set water quality criteria for M&I, agriculture, and fish and wildlife beneficial use protections?
Generally and at about that level.
In your review, in your testimony, you talk about your review of USBR and DWR's petition to the State Water Resources Control Board for changes and transfers. Is there a situation where PCWA must release water from storage to meet D-1641 water quality standards contained in those tables?
I'm not aware of an instance where we have specifically released for D-1641 standards.
And are you aware of any senior water rights holders other than DWR and USBR with responsibilities to release water from storage to meet D-1641 requirements?
I don't have enough knowledge of what other senior water right holders are doing or not doing.
And in your review of the petitions for DWR and USBR that you refer to in your testimony on page 5, lines 18 through 23, is there ever a situation where PCWA must decrease direct diversions to meet D-1641 water quality standards?
Are you asking if we must, I'm not sure what that has to do with lines 18 to 20, but if the question is, do we have to curtail diversions in order to meet D-1641 standards? We have not done that at our project reservoirs.
Because do you know if you're required to?
That is not I don't think that's in my water right permits that we currently have.
And has PCWA ever protested the actions you are, quote, end quote, aware of?
Yes.
Have you proposed that USBR and DWR, sorry, strike that. Have you proposed that DWR and these actions have a refill agreement?
I believe we have, yes.
And which ones are those?
We protested a joint point of diversion, a recent joint point of diversion petition in front of the state board.
Others?
I think that's it.
Do you remember what year that was?
Not off the top of my head. It's within the last 5 years.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. It's a pleasure as always. I don't have any further questions for this panel at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. That was very efficient. I will look to the room. Does anyone else have questions for these witnesses? I did want to ask, this is more a question for you, Mr. Tunlin. So, which is, my understanding is that initially PCWA and EID submitted with their exhibits a statement that there were no terms and conditions that would alleviate the protest to this petition. And then what I heard from you in the opening statement, and you're certainly allowed to evolve, I encourage folks to evolve your position over time. But what I heard in your opening statement was that you're not asking for a denial of DWR's petition, but rather appropriate terms and conditions that would prevent the alleged injury. Am I understanding correctly what the position is now?
That is correct, yes.
Have you
And we did say when we did not submit protest conditions, proposed protest dismissal conditions, the outset of the evidentiary hearing, that we reserve the right to submit those as we saw the testimony. So
certainly, and understood. This is not. I just wanted to make sure I understand. My understanding is you have not submitted any proposed terms and conditions. Will you please do that? It would be quite helpful, I think, if for the hearing team to see understand as soon as possible what types of terms and conditions might resolve the protest. I also think it might facilitate a conversation with DWR, if that's possible.
we would be happy to do so, hearing officer.
Great, thank you. What I'd like to do is, because this went so quickly, I'd like to go ahead and take a 10-minute break so that I can organize my thoughts and see if I have, this is actually quite complicated testimony and thinking about the priority of things, and see if I have any questions, and then we can come back and hopefully finish up with this panel and break early for the day. So let's go ahead, take 10 minutes. We'll come back at 10:17, please. Welcome back. I will look to our court reporter. Are you ready for us to go back on the record?
I am Hearing Officer Kinsey.
Thank you. With that, I've been trying to formulate how to follow up on this. I think I have some questions probably for Mr. Fecco and possibly Mr. Corcoran. I'm not sure which of you will be in the best position to answer. I'm trying to make sure I understand the kind of the timing of how all this works. So my understanding is that in certain years, generally in dry conditions, pursuant to the Water Forum Agreement, water and through reoperation of the reservoirs, water is it released so as to flow in the lower American River? I don't know if it's released or kind of bypassed.
Sure. Maybe I can help you with this
Great.
and set the stage for it, Hearing Officer,
Please.
and then you tell me if I'm on the right track.
Please.
Yeah, pursuant to our water forum agreement, as conditions get drier in the American River watershed, PCWA has agreed to make additional releases from our reservoir system through our hydropower project on the Middle Fork American River project, and make those releases available to the lower American River. In order to ensure that releases make it to the lower American River and don't just get diverted to storage by reclamation at Folsom, right, which stands between our project and the lower American River, is Folsom Reservoir and operated by the Central Valley Project. And so to ensure that flows make it down the lower American River, what we do is enter into temporary transfers with downstream parties that guarantee that reclamation releases water down the lower American River and to those parties who purchase the water from us. That's the only the way we can guarantee that water actually makes it through Folsom. Does that make sense?
Yes, at least I think so.
And then the way we do that is by making additional releases on a schedule that benefits the buyer on the other end of the transfer a business arrangement.
Understood. And then the companion part of that is then in a subsequent, and you will tell me, I don't know if it's months, years, something like that, the PCWA will make diversions into its reservoir to refill the space that was evacuated from conducting this transfer. Is that right?
Correct. So those transfers, generally, we start making those releases in general in the June time period, whenever we receive approval, June, July time period, whenever we receive approval for the transfer. Generally, those releases will continue through the summer period, right up until October, sometimes even a little bit later. And then we demonstrate that we make those releases by lowering the carryover storage in our reservoirs by the like amount of the transfer by the end of the year. Just call it January 1st of the next year. Then, pursuant to any refill agreements we've entered into, we carry that deficit in our reservoirs until the refill conditions have been met for those transfers. Those refill conditions have changed, I would say, dramatically and become more onerous over time. They used to be based on Folsom Reservoir incurring into its flood control space. In other words, when Folsom was full and couldn't store any more water, that's all that could be done in that watershed, and our refill reservation, that amount that we had transferred, was cleared. Then it became Folsom must be spilling and the delta is in excess conditions. That was a second iteration of the refill agreements that DWR and Reclamation were willing to enter into with us. And then finally, the third iteration is Folsom must be spilling, the delta must be in excess condition, and we have to somehow prove that we've modified our operations by reducing hydropower production or some other metric in order to satisfy refill, which makes it more and more difficult for us to actually refill our reservoirs. Does all that make sense?
Yes, generally.
Good.
Thank you. No, and I very much appreciate this. This is quite helpful.
Yeah.
Then can you also clarify for me, these refill agreements are entered into between PCWA and the projects so as to prevent the projects from opposing PCWA's petition to transfer, or is it, how do those, or is there some other mechanism? Why does PCWA enter into these agreements?
Yeah. So what generally happens is when we file our petition for temporary transfer with the State Water Board, the projects, either comment or protest, and the State Board, in its order approving the transfer, says that before we can commence the transfer, we must enter into, I should say, when they comment or protest, the project's alleged injury. And the State Board, I think without, in my view, this opinion, without substantiation, they sort of ask us to work with the projects to reduce or eliminate that injury. And they do that with the format of this refill agreement. It is not an agreement that is negotiated with the State Water Board. It is a directive of the State Water Board to enter into that agreement with the two projects and then submit that before we can commence transferring water. It's a bit unusual in my view.
I understand the nuances of that. I mean, a little bit of that process. I understand what you mean. Thank you. This is quite very, very helpful. So this may be my question for you, Mr. Corcoran. And now I'm sorry. Is there an equivalent with El Dorado Irrigation District?
Yes, thank you for asking. While Mr. Fecco had described this one specific transfer that is implemented through the water form agreement, the district is a big proponent and a collaborator in that effort, both between East Bay Mud and PWA. We do not have a specific transfer as part of the water form agreement. Having said that, the same mechanics, the same principles, the same agreements, the same constraints, everything that Mr. Fecco described apply to any transfer that has been attempted to be effectuated by the district, and I presume also Mr. Fecco's agency as well. Effectively, the DWR becomes the gatekeeper. I'm looking at an order from the State Board now that directs us to work with DWR to have this refill agreement in place, even when we do not use state facilities. In years that we have used federal facilities, I believe Mr. Fecco in his testimony described 2020 with both he and our agency used state facilities. But there have been other years, I know for a fact, that we did not use state facilities, yet we were still subject to entering a refill agreement with the Department of Water Resources in those years.
Thank you. I think that answers for now all my questions. I really appreciate that. That was quite helpful for me. It would be fair, I think, given everything I just elicited, which was maybe a little more detail. Ms. Morris, do you want to have another shot at jumping in before we go to redirect?
I think that makes sense so that Mr. Donlin can
redirect on it.
Yep.
Yeah.
If we could please pull up Ms. Mullen, what's been marked as PCW EID PC WA 107. And I guess I'll ask you first, Mr. Fecco. Do you recall the discussion you just had with the hearing officer regarding the State Water Resources Control Board requiring reservoir refill criteria? You're on mute, yeah.
Yeah, I do.
And is it your understanding that any water transfers that have reservoir reoperations are generally subject to some kind of refill criteria agreement?
Are you asking me any reservoir reoperation transfers that I do or that anybody does?
In general, if you know, you clearly track what's going on in the water world and transfers.
I'm not, I don't think I agree with that statement.
Okay. I'm going to ask Ms. Mullen if you could go to the first page. You referenced this, so I hope you're familiar with it, that this is the order approving the temporary changes in order to facilitate water transfer, correct?
I did. Yep.
And that water transfer was a reservoir reoperation transfer?
Yes. Are we looking at the right page here, Ms. Morris?
Well, we're going to go there, but I'm just laying the foundation.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
The transfers that PCWA does is reservoir reoperation transfers.
Okay. And if we could scroll to PDF page, get is on the bottom of 3, bottom of 4. Yep. And do you agree with what the state board says here, that following the transfer, the reservoirs could have additional storage capacity that would result in diversions that would not occur in the absence of the transfer?
Following the transfer, the reservoirs may have additional storage capacity that will result in diversions that would not occur in the absence of the transfer. That's what it says right there.
And do you agree that could happen?
As a result of us lowering our reservoirs from their normal carryover storage, end of year carryover storage target, there is additional capacity in our reservoirs in the subsequent year.
So for example, if water that you released during a transfer was held back and wasn't transferred, then that water would have remained in your reservoirs and there would not be, for lack of a better word, a hole in the reservoir that you could have refilled, correct?
Yes, water that we do not transfer would remain in our reservoirs.
And do you see that the state board has found, and I agree that I won't choose your word, you disagreed, I don't remember the word you used here, but that reservoir refill has a potential to injure other legal users of water if it occurs when the delta is in balanced conditions?
I'm sorry, where are you looking?
At the bottom line on page 3 and the top line on page 4.
Yep, I see that.
And that was the finding that the State Water Resources Control Board made, correct?
That's in the order, yes.
Isn't it possible that if you were to release water and then just recapture it in the next year, that not even DWR, but if there were other legal users of water downstream, that water could have been passed through or made available, that they could also be injured?
Objection. It calls for a legal conclusion.
Noted.
I'll just make that a standing objection,
I'll just
Hearing
say-
Officer Kinsey.
Yeah, we can make it a standing objection. I think just as a matter of mechanics, I think I would like to hear an answer, just in terms of.
Understood based on Mr. Fecco's opinion.
Yes, please.
I think that is a nuanced question that relies on water rights priority, the water rights priority system that I would look to my legal counsel to better answer than I would.
All right, let me try it this way.
Yeah.
If you release water, let's say 10 acre feet, because that's easy for me to do, lure math. You release 10 acre feet of water so that it could be available for a transfer. And then it rains. And you maybe have had a full reservoir capacity, and now you have 10 acre feet. You make that water available, you're compensated for it, and then within 3 weeks, you just refill that water. Would you agree with me that had you not evacuated that 10 acre feet, that 10 acre feet would have had to be either released from the reservoir and or bypassed to other potential uses downstream?
Again, how this works is that if I had transferred 10 acre feet, I would lower my reservoir carryover storage, end of year carryover storage target by that 10 acre feet. And then hold that deficit into the subsequent year. And then pursuant to the terms of any refill agreement that we'd entered into, we would be able to refill that 10 acre feet.
But my hypothetical wasn't about refill criteria. It assumes no refill criteria. It's assuming that you could fill that hole immediately. So, based on that clarification, would you agree that water would have been available for others to use downstream of your reservoirs?
To the extent that we'd have gone to the same carryover, end of year carryover storage, yes.
And if you could scroll down to Ms. Mullen, please, just slightly. And do you agree that the last section of this state board order, in essence, says that refill criteria that's developed in conjunction with reclamation would, in essence, ensure that that refill of the reservoir space that would be made available from the transfer won't have an impact on other legal users of water?
That's what it says in that last
Objection.
paragraph.
That's not what it says, Ms. Kinsey. If you want to have Mr. Fecco read the words on the page, he can do that, but that's not what Ms. Morris's summary said.
I think the witness already answered. I don't have any.
And I think the words are in front of us, so I think we can verify that. Thank you. Ms. Morris, did you say you had no further questions?
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Then, Mr. Donlin, and if you want a few, we can take a break if you want a few minutes to decide about redirect, but do you have redirect for the panel?
I did have some. Thankfully, some of your questions picked up on some things that we were going to ask some questions, but I do have one more question that hasn't been addressed.
Please.
Mr. Fecco, you mentioned that PCWA protest a petition for, I believe it would be a petition for change for joint points of diversion sometime in the last 5 years. Do you, why did you protest that? Why did PCWA protest that change petition?
Okay, bear with me. I'm going to walk you through why we protested. It was a joint point of diversion petition. I looked during the break. It was during 2024, and we commented on that. As a result of the ever-increasing conditions that the projects had put on refill on our reservoirs, we began to look harder at project operations and the holes that those operations may or may not be creating in project reservoirs. What I mean by that is, in specific to the joint point of diversion petitions that have been filed, and that was filed in 2024, it appeared to us that the projects using each other's diversion facilities in the Delta served to move more water than would have been possible under their individual diversion points. And hence they filed a petition with the State Water Board to allow them to do that. And it appears to us to be an analogous situation to our water transfers, whereby by moving additional water through Delta facilities, the projects would in essence be creating a hole in their own project reservoirs. And in fact, those project reservoirs are noted in that order, approving the joint point of diversion. And so that petition essentially creates the same condition that we are subject to by when we create a hole in our reservoir by doing transfers. The projects were doing the same in their reservoirs. And what we were looking for was parity from the State Water Board about refilling the holes in those reservoirs, because in much the same way Ms. Morris described potential injury and described the State Board order looking at potential injury, to the extent that the projects then refill the holes in those reservoirs that they've created by the joint point of diversion petition, that makes less Delta water available in the Delta, could potentially change the Delta condition, and thereby touches back to my own refill criteria that they've imposed on us. So in other words, they change the conditions in the Delta and then claim that I can't refill potentially in this hypothetical because they've changed conditions by refilling holes in their reservoirs for which they don't have reservoir refill agreements. Mr. Donlin, that was nuanced and complicated. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Fecco. Ms. Kinsey, I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Donlin. Ms. Morris, do you have follow-up on that?
I do. Mr. Fecco, would you agree that the joint point of diversion is the use of the Bureau and DWR's own water rights and not a water transfer?
As I read the joint point position, it reflects the Bureau and DWR's own water rights.
And Mr. Fecco, would you agree that PCWA reservoirs are all upstream of any USBR or DWR reservoirs, so therefore unaffected by any operations of those reservoirs in your own reservoirs?
I disagree that we are not affected by the operation of those reservoirs. My refill agreements are specifically tied to the operation of those reservoirs.
So your assertion is that you're impacted solely through the reservoir refill agreements, correct?
My assertion is that in the case of reduced storage at Folsom, for instance, that reduces the chance of that part of my refill agreement, which depends on Folsom storage and encroachment into the Folsom flood pool, impacts my ability to fill my reservoirs, correct?
But the use of water in your area within PCWA's service area is not impacted by the reservoir refill criteria, correct?
I disagree again. To the extent that I'm forced to carry a deficit over multiple years in reservoir refill criteria because Folsom hasn't spilled, that leaves less water available for my local area of use.
And Mr. Fecco, is PCWA responsible for, in your words, gatekeeping or backstopping the D1641, the meeting of the D1641 requirements?
I don't think I said those words.
Well, use a different word. Is PCWA responsible for meeting any D1641 requirements?
I think I've already answered no.
And is DWR and the Bureau responsible for meeting D1641 requirements?
That is my understanding.
I don't have any further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. I'm going to exercise my ability to do this, which is I have a follow-up questions, and I'm sorry, hopefully it won't cause a chain reaction here, but I think this is for Mr. Fecco. Can you just describe for me generally, I'm not familiar with the water forum agreement. Can you describe for me generally why, to the extent you know, why that agreement came to be and what the issue, what issues were intended to be addressed by the flows in the Lower American?
Yes, we may have to schedule another hearing day for that complete description, Ms. Kinsey, but I will attempt to get to it. The Water Forum Agreement came out of roughly 2 decades of conflict on the Lower American River related to diversions by the city and county of Sacramento, by East Bay Municipal Utility District, and the operations of Folsom Reservoir itself. It is essentially a voluntary peace treaty among the water providers of the Sacramento region to more sustainably operate the Lower American River and ensure the health of the threatened steelhead fishery and the fall run salmon fishery. And it essentially, what it does is essentially limits the purveyor's ability to take surface water. It mandates water conservation efforts, certain water conservation efforts. It attempts to get to some level of groundwater sustainability. This is prior to the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, of course. And so essentially it attempts to ensure that particularly in the driest years, we do not have a repeat of the 1976-1977 drought where the fishery of the Lower American River was almost entirely wiped out. And so it is a set of voluntary actions by the purveyors in the region, the environmental community, and local governments and the development community to operate the Lower American River in a more sustainable fashion. And it has held since the year 2000.
Thank you. That's helpful. And then, to your knowledge, let me back up. When I asked you questions earlier, I think you described, as I understood, you described to me the transfers as one mechanism to ensure that water flows through Folsom Reservoir. Is that generally accurate?
Yeah, it is the mechanism that PCWA has used to ensure that releases that we make specifically to meet our Water Forum Purveyor Specific Agreement commitment actually make it through Folsom Reservoir. Because in PCWA's viewpoint, if we just made extra releases, it could very well end up becoming project yield for the Central Valley project as those waters enter into Folsom Reservoir. And so one way to ensure that they make it down the Lower American River, and this is a critical function of the Water Forum Agreement, is that these flows have to make it down the Lower American River. One way to ensure that is to find a purchaser of that water downstream of the confluence of the American and Sacramento. It doesn't matter who that is as far as the Water Forum Agreement is concerned. We have found it convenient, as I've testified to enter into an MOU with East Bay Mud to ensure that that water is made available on a more regular basis, that it simplifies our annual transfer to know that East Bay Mud has a right of first refusal to that water.
Thank you. And then, to the extent you can answer, I know Mr. Kelly is there with you. I'm not asking for any privileged information, but has PCWA ever considered the use of a 1707? If you're familiar with, are you familiar with the Water Code section 1707 with respect to in-stream changes of water rights for in-stream beneficial uses?
I'm familiar with it, yes.
Has PCWA considered that as a mechanism to protect flows in the Lower American?
We have not considered that we have not considered that.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I think with that, Ms. Morris, it's once again fair for me to turn to you. Do you have any questions based on that addition? And thank you for, I mean, I get to do what I want a little bit, but I apologize for that. Do you have any follow-up?
I don't have any follow-up. No, I think I'm good.
Okay.
I think we don't need to keep opening this up.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Donlin, I don't think it would be appropriate. Well, based on my questions, do you have any follow-up?
I do not, Ms. Kinsey. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good. And with that, I want to thank all three of you very much for your testimony today and your careful consideration of my questions and answering all my questions. And you are excused. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, I think my understanding is that we would turn back, not today, but tomorrow to Dr. Buckley, if I have that right, and then would continue forward from there, and that we do not have other witnesses lined up for today. So I'm looking to the room to see if I'm wrong, please raise a hand. And otherwise we will break now and then plan to reconvene for those who are participating in the site visit at 1 o'clock. All right, then we are adjourned until the site visit at 1 o'clock. Thank you.